The Legend of Zelda is an extremely successful game series spanning decades about a hero, Link, saving the Princess Zelda and the land of Hyrule from evil, Ganon, in the majority of these titles. So naturally, there's a lot of mainline games and spin-offs to enjoy. However, what's always baffled me as a fan of these games is how colourful and for all ages so many of them are, despite the themes present in them. Some of these games go all in on those more macabre themes, and it creates dark fantasy titles that shake up the usual Zelda formula. I love these types of Zelda games, and so do a lot of other people. On a community scale, some people take these themes and ideas present and build upon what's already established, furthering it or creating a new spin on things. Just like in my Splatoon's disturbing analog horror video, we'll be looking at two YouTubers that have taken already established ideas and themes and used them to create their own analog horror stories, adding to these mysteries. These creators are Stuffy Studios and Maple Riot. Stuffy has created the series The Macabre Experiment, and we'll be taking a look at Experiment 3, Ben Drowned, a twist on the Ben Drowned story. On the other hand, Maple has created the LOZ or LOZ set of videos, which may also tie into another series on their channel. I'll be focusing on these in the video, so let's start off at The Macabre Experiment 3, Ben Drowned. Just as a general spoiler warning, I will be referencing events from the Ben Drowned creepypasta made by Jadusable, so if you don't want things to be spoiled, watch this video after you've finished up with the creepypasta.
I found it at a yard sale. I don't know, I just felt like buying it. I was familiar with the game and remembered playing it at my friend's house. I thought I could try and beat it on my own. Sure, it was a used copy, but it was all I could really afford. People would sell it for over-the-top prices everywhere I looked, and that's not really worth it. It's just a game.
We start off with a person, Oliver, recounting his experience buying a used Majora's Mask cartridge for the Nintendo 64, which looks incredibly cursed and sinister. Why? Because he wanted to buy a cheaper used copy. But that's going to have its consequences, as we're soon going to find out. If you think this sounds familiar in any way, then that's for a good reason. That's because this story is inspired by the original Ben Drowned creepypasta from 2010 that was posted to 4chan's X-board. As a quick summary, the user, who goes by Jadusable, recounts his horrors of purchasing a haunted copy of Majora's Mask at a garage sale, and what he encountered in that haunted cartridge, the main encounter being Ben, a young boy who, well, drowned, with his spirit haunting the game. The story goes much further from there, but you get the gist. Back to the Macabre Experiment, Oliver continues on about how he was followed around by some being that looks like Link. He couldn't tell if this was intentional by the game or not, and no one else online talked about any of this in their games.
I felt full of dread hearing the distorted music playing everywhere I went, but I also felt intrigued.
It's like a trip down Ben Drowned memory lane, isn't it? It's extremely nostalgic, and that's because, for the time being, the footage we're being shown hasn't been altered too much. The gameplay has that analog feel and sound to it, but that's all. Well, for now at least. This is where things definitely take a turn. Oliver is perpetually stuck in this fight, and that seems normal for the Ben Drowned saga, but the visual distortions and screams when Link is set on fire are new, jarring, and disturbing. They go on, adding a sort of insanity to it all, like it represents the pain or torture someone could have gone through. Possibly Ben? Oliver is then moved to a graveyard, Ikena Graveyard, where he looks at a grave. This segment of the video is similar to the fourth Jadusable Ben drowned video, Jadusable.wmv. A face appears asking for help. Please, help me. Could this be Ben? Either way, this person's face is somehow disturbing and funny if looked at for long enough. I don't know, it unintentionally broke my immersion because this guy looks 2 years old and 80 years old at the same time. But I digress. Oliver finishes up here and then this happens. This is the spiral room that leads to the innards of Majora's Mask's clock tower, part of the only known entrance or portal from Hyrule to Termina, almost like an allegory for a portal from the living to the dead. You can't run, and Father, why would you do it? This paints a story of a tragedy involving Ben and his father, at least from what we've seen so far. If you know the extended story of Ben Drowned, you'll know that there's a character known as the Father. Culbrus, as he's also known as, is a character and was the leader and founder of the Moon Children, the big cult of the Ben Drowned story. And more importantly, he was the one responsible for sacrificing Ben by drowning him in a pool. His sprites and overall look are quite unique and sit in the uncanny valley. One of these that represents the father is the masked salesman, but is the father in the creepypasta the same as the one in the Macabre Experiments? Oliver continues to play from a file called Your Turn, and he's helpless to do anything as a shadowed entity approaches him with laughter that's heard. Since it's his turn, could this be Ben approaching Oliver? And why? We're then shown the character select and title screen before Oliver plays the Ben save file that has an owl statue save point on it. It's become apparent to us that Ben is trapped in this statue that represents Link. He's stuck in this shell and wants to be freed. He wants to rest peacefully without him. That him most likely being the father. And that's when we enter the dawn of a new day, but we don't see it. If you've watched the Ben.wmv video from the Ben Drowned creepypasta, you'll know that this follows from there. But we don't get that here. It just ends. And that's where the video leaves us. Macabre Experiment 3, Ben Drowned. On the surface, it's almost like a remix of the Ben Drowned creepypasta, adding onto it, shifting it down a different path through using multiple videos as a base, a more condensed and still understandable path. And what's added is still enough to give us the Ben Drowned story, which in the Macabre Experiment went as follows. Oliver, our narrator at the start of the video, summarized his experience with a used copy of Majora's Mask that he bought secondhand. He's stalked in-game by Ben, toyed with, and was pleaded to by Ben on multiple occasions for help and to rest in peace without him, the father. Now, what about the look of the video? Like I said before, that analog horror aesthetic is created in this video through the visuals and audio. You know, the VHS aesthetic. It's a staple in the genre, and it's clear to see some inspirations from the Mandela catalog in the way that some characters are designed. They add to that uneasy feeling you get when watching a video like this. Like you're watching a tape recorded by someone of the events that went down and it works. But here's where things get crazy interesting and lore heavy. I mentioned before that this is a series, and as we can clearly see, this is experiment number 3, but as we saw in the video's intro, this is failed experiment number 8. And as I've already mentioned, this video is one in a series of pretty interesting videos. By the title of the videos, you could be able to piece together what the premise for this series is. People online have pieced a lot of things together, and there's even fan-made Macabre Experiment videos related to other creepypastas too, which is pretty neat. I really don't want to spoil anything because I'd highly recommend watching it and piecing things together for yourself, but here's some things to ponder. Who is the father, and why is there a haunted copy of Majora's Mask in the Macabre Experiment universe? I'll have Stuffy Studios' channel and the Macabre Experiment videos linked in the description. We have 3 videos in the Loz series created by Maple Riot to dissect. These videos are quite short but explain a very grim story that may have ties to another one of Maple's video series. So let's begin at Loz, 1987. Already, we can see that something is off. The intro scroll screen, comparing it to the original The Legend of Zelda scroll screen really makes that apparent, the main differences being the text on screen and the treasures. Go find the 8 units, Jack, to save her. Who is Jack, and what are the 8 units? Are they him? Following that, we have the treasures, which there aren't any like in the original game. This doesn't bode well, especially thanks to how the music sounds too. It's distorted and the tone is off. It's lower than the usual theme music. The save file creator has forced whoever is playing to choose the name Jack, no matter what they pressed. It even sounded like the game was getting angry whenever the player was picking something it didn't want. Picking other save files makes the game flip out too, with those 2 save files disappearing. So it seems that the player is being told to focus on Jack or the story of Jack, the same Jack with the missing 8 units mentioned in the intro. The eyes on the Jack save file change from the usual green pupils to a similar color to the other part of the eye. With a color like that, we could assume it could be something like blood. The name is then registered and the other save files are back, but their names aren't mentioned. Could they also be part of the story? Link turns around and the screen goes to black as a crushed and distorted save file select music plays and fades away. You may also recognize this music as the fairy fountain music found in many Zelda games. What's interesting is that this music isn't found in the first Legend of Zelda game. But what can we gather from this video? We learn that the objective of the game is to find 8 units, or the 8 units of Jack. The game has forced the player into making save file 1 named Jack, and once the game starts, Link looks back most likely in fear of something. We can assume that something ominous is behind him, and we can guess that something bad is going to happen to him. Could he be Jack? Loz Hide. We start off with the game looking surprisingly normal despite what we saw at the end of Loz 1987, but of course, things aren't how they seem, and Link can't move to a new screen tile. He's stuck here at the start no matter where he goes. The overall music distorts and becomes mostly unrecognizable the more Link tries to go off in different directions, and things glitch out. Despite all of this happening, his icon still moves on the map in the top left, and we do see another icon show up too, a red one. It keeps getting closer and closer until it's gone, until whatever was pursuing him is right there on the same screen. Someone finally playing with me is said to Link by a character not normally present in the game. He looks like a young kid and appears to give Link a sword like the old man usually does, except his head caves in. Could this be Jack? What happened to Jack? Why is he here? Is he hiding? From there, all audio cuts out once Link stares at the entrance to the cave, then runs in the other direction to the next screen. If you know about how this cave looks in the normal game, you'll know that there is no path that goes up. There's just some fire, the old man, and he gives you a sword. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. And what did Link see? Most likely, whatever this is, and clearly he's running away from it. He now needs to hide. The description for the video might give us a hint as to why. He wouldn't stop hurting me. Who is he? Loz, the basement. This is the final video. Link finds himself in a room with flames, most likely a place dubbed as the basement, and then this happens. After the lights go out, we can see a pair of eyes staring down Link. The child we saw in the previous video appears, apologizing and pleading to his dad as he relentlessly bludgeons him until there's nothing more than a pile of meat and clothes. Very briefly, we can see a silhouette of Ganon standing over the boy, who most likely represents Dad. This is quite graphic for something pixelated, and it caught me off guard the first time I saw it. You'll notice that I've censored this too because I'm not sure how it would fly on YouTube. Technically, the original video is on YouTube and it's up and fine and all, but I don't want to risk it. The mention of a father bludgeoning his son is already iffy enough, so if you want to see the uncensored version of it, you can watch the video linked in the description, or you can see it uncensored on my Patreon. Regardless, it's a pretty miserable scene, thanks to the depressingly toned game over screen music too. And we don't know what the son saw or what he could have done, but we do know that the dad didn't like it. A fairy emerges from the son's body as well, most likely symbolizing his death, and if we look at the video's description, we can see that it says, "I didn't hear his car come. Jake." Whose car? Dad's? Who is Jake, let alone Jack? Is it a typo, or does it tie into something else? All in all, here we have the story of Jack. A child, possibly one of 3 that was chased by his dad, went to hide in the basement and then was killed by his dad for unknown reasons. The whereabouts of Mom and who she is unknown. She could be represented by Zelda. And are there 2 other siblings? These types of videos are very similar to Maple's other series called Too Much Kirby, also known as TMK for short, and this story could tie in somehow with all of that. I won't say much about it all, but it's a pretty chilling and dreadful story with a similar analog horror and creepypasta feel to it that Loz has. Speaking of dreadful, I really want to show you all this scene from the first video in the TMK series, Kirby.mp4. Have you ever looked at something and it made your heart just drop and you felt sick to your stomach? This one part of the video gave me that feeling on first viewing. The image of those kids at the last note of the death jingle gives me the heebie-jeebies. I think it's the framing of the image, the hard lights and shadows, the censoring of the kids' eyes, and the strange-looking Kirby staring directly at the camera. Anyway, if you're interested in seeing Maple Riot's content like Loz or TMK, I'll have the links in the description. And that's that. 2 analog horror style pieces of content from 2 YouTubers, Stuffy Studios and Maple Riot. These were some pretty disturbing sets of videos that really reshaped their source materials and were turned into something new. Like I've already said before, you can find the links to all of what was shown in this video in the description, and I'd highly recommend checking them out if you're interested in all of what was shown. If you enjoyed the video, why not consider liking and subscribing? I'm almost at 50,000 subscribers, so that would be cool. And I'll have a 50k sub special video for it. Analyzing this sort of stuff is pretty fun as well, so if you have any suggestions on things to cover, let me know. And as always, here's a massive shout out to my lovely patrons. You guys are absolute legends, and I'll catch ya in the next one.